The glass shattered before anyone could stop it. A single wine glass slipped from the long mahogany table, tumbling in slow motion. It struck the marble floor with a piercing crack, scattering shards across the dining room like jagged diamonds. The silence that followed was suffocating. At the head of the table, Richard Caldwell, the billionaire father, didn't even flinch. His silver hair gleamed under the chandelier, his sharp blue eyes fixed on his son. Across from him, Adrian Caldwell sat rigid, his jaw clenched. He wasn't looking at his father, though. His gaze was locked on the young woman who had just dropped the glass. Her hands trembled. Her face was pale. The other guests, business partners, lawyers, socialites, shifted in their seats, the tension so heavy it threatened to choke the air. "Pick it up," Richard's voice cut through the stillness. Calm, controlled, almost too calm, but the woman didn't move. She stood frozen, her chest rising and falling, her eyes darting between father and son. Adrian finally spoke. His voice was low, shaking with anger, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "No, she won't pick it up." Every head turned. Some mouths parted in shock. No one interrupted. Richard leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. His expression was unreadable. "Adrian," he said softly, "this woman has embarrassed you, embarrassed this family, embarrassed me, and still you defend her?" The woman's eyes brimmed with tears, but she kept her lips pressed tight. Adrian's voice hardened. "I don't care what you think. I love her." The words landed like a thunderclap. A billionaire's son defying his father in front of the world for the woman who wasn't supposed to belong at that table. And then Richard's smile came. Slow, cold. A blade hidden in velvet. "You love her?" he repeated. "Then perhaps you should tell everyone about her past." Gasps rippled across the room. Forks clattered. Someone whispered under their breath. The woman's body stiffened. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. Adrian looked at her, searching, desperate. "What's he talking about?" She couldn't speak. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Richard's voice sliced through the moment. "Go on, son. Tell them who she really is. Or should I?" Adrian slammed his hands on the table. The plates rattled, the chandelier swayed. "Stop!" His voice cracked, raw with fury. "Don't you dare!" Oh, but it was too late. Richard leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. "Her name isn't Emily. It never was." "She's been lying to you, lying to all of us. And when you hear the truth, you'll hate her more than I do." The room fell into absolute silence. Emily, if that was even her name, stood trembling, her face a storm of fear and shame. Adrian's chest rose and fell like a man on the verge of breaking apart. The chandelier hummed overhead, crystals catching the light, casting fractured rainbows across a night that would never be forgotten, and then everything froze. Time itself seemed to stop on the moment Adrian looked at her, eyes filled with questions, betrayal, and something worse, doubt. The screen of memory paused, and the story rewinds. Back to the beginning, back to the quiet days before the storm, before love collided with secrets that could never stay, buried. The spring air carried the faint scent of jasmine that morning. Adrian Caldwell leaned against the library's arched window, sunlight streaming across the ancient shelves of leather-bound books. He thought he understood his life, structured, predictable, scripted by the weight of family fortune. He had no idea his world was about to unravel the moment she walked into the room. But before we get there, before the heartache, the fire, the betrayals, let's step back further to who Adrian was, to why her past mattered, to the fate that pulled them together like two stars destined to collide, because love doesn't begin with fire, it begins with a spark. Adrian Caldwell was 22, the only son of one of the wealthiest men in the country. His father, Richard, had built an empire out of steel, oil, and politics. His mother had long ago disappeared from the picture, leaving behind a name spoken only in whispers. The Caldwell estate stretched for acres, a mansion that felt more like a fortress. Marble floors, spiral staircases, and chandeliers that burned through the night. It was wealth in its purest, most suffocating form. And Adrian hated it. He didn't hate money itself. He hated what it did, the way it built walls instead of bridges, the way it forced him to live under the shadow of a father whose expectations were impossible to meet. That spring, his father had decided Adrian needed discipline, a tutor, to prepare him for the responsibilities of inheriting an empire. Not just any tutor, a carefully chosen woman, discreet, intelligent, respectable, or so Richard believed. When Emily arrived, young, graceful, her eyes carrying shadows she didn't speak of, Adrian felt something shift. She didn't look like the others who floated through the mansion, polished and hollow. She looked real, and it terrified him. Because real was dangerous, and it was real that would ruin everything. But in that frozen moment, back at the table, when Richard Caldwell smiled and prepared to burn the truth into the world, Adrian would realize love wasn't enough. Not when lies tangled around them like barbed wire. Not when the past refused to stay buried. Not when the cost of loving her would mean losing everything he had ever known. And still, Adrian couldn't let go. That night, the storm would break. But to understand how it came to this, we must go back. To the first lesson, to the first conversation, to the first time Adrian looked at Emily and realized his life would never belong to him again. The past waits in shadows, and now it begins to whisper. The Caldwell Library was a cathedral of silence, its ceilings arched high above, painted with faded frescoes imported from Italy 2 centuries ago. The walls were lined with shelves so tall they required ladders, each book polished by the hands of caretakers who never read them. Sunlight spilled in through tall windows, warming the oak tables below. Adrian sat there, restless, flipping a pen in his fingers. His father had told him the new tutor would arrive at 10 sharp. It was 9:58. He hated the idea already. A stranger paid to mold him into something he didn't want to be, a future CEO, a polished weapon in his father's arsenal. But when the doors opened, the sound of footsteps breaking the stillness, Adrian's complaints faded before he could even speak them. She walked in with her head slightly bowed, carrying a leather satchel. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly, though a few strands had escaped, brushing her cheeks. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, not designer, not ostentatious, just modest and professional. But her eyes, they were what stopped him cold, grey with flecks of green. Eyes that carried storms. Eyes that had seen too much, Mr. Caldwell. Her voice was quiet, polite. He cleared his throat. Adrian, call me Adrian, she gave a small nod. I'm Emily. Emily. The name fit easily, but something about the way she said it, slight hesitation like she was trying it on, slid past him unnoticed at the time. Adrian gestured to the table. So, my father hired you to fix me? Her lips curved into the faintest smile. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to teach you. The way she said it, steady, without condescension, disarmed him. Most people spoke to him like he was fragile glass, or worse, an heirloom they had to polish until it gleamed. She spoke like he was a person. Teach me what exactly? He asked, leaning back in his chair. Her eyes scanned the room, the shelves heavy with centuries of knowledge. How to think, how to argue, how to stand your ground without losing yourself. Adrian raised a brow. That's not exactly math or economics. No, she said simply. But it's what your father asked of me. And if I'm not mistaken, what you need most. That stung. He opened his mouth to fire back, then stopped. She wasn't wrong. For weeks their lessons continued, mornings in the library, afternoons in the study, evenings sometimes spilling over into debates by the fireplace. Emily's teaching wasn't conventional. She didn't drill him on figures or formulas. She challenged him with questions. With philosophy, literature, ethics, what do you believe loyalty means? She asked once, pacing slowly in front of the window. Adrian frowned. Doing what you're told? No, she countered, stopping to face him. That's obedience. Loyalty is choosing to stand beside someone even when it costs you. Her words lingered with him long after she left. Another day, she handed him a book. Dostoevsky. Heavy, dense. Read it, she said. He groaned. This looks like torture. Life will feel like torture sometimes, she replied with a faint smile. Consider this practice. He read it begrudgingly, and when he returned with questions, they argued late into the night, voices low but intense, like two fires feeding off each other. But beneath the surface of those lessons, something else brewed. Adrian noticed the way Emily sometimes froze when a servant entered the room unexpectedly, how her hands lingered too long on the strap of her satchel, as if guarding something inside. He noticed the scar on her wrist one evening when her sleeve slipped. She covered it quickly, pretending it wasn't there. He noticed the way she avoided personal questions with elegant deflections. "Where are you from?" he asked once. "Here and there," she replied, brushing it off. "Do you have family?" She hesitated, then forced a small smile. "Not the kind that matters." He wanted to push, but something about the steel in her eyes warned him not to. Still, the questions burned inside him. At night, Adrian lay awake in his cavernous bedroom, staring at the ornate ceiling. He thought about her voice, the way it softened when she explained something complicated. He thought about the way her eyes sparked when she caught him, outsmarting her in a debate, and he hated himself for it. She was his tutor, paid, temporary, off-limits, but feelings don't obey rules, and the more he tried to push her from his mind, the deeper she sank into him. One afternoon, it rained. The storm rolled across the estate, thunder shaking the windows, rain slashing against the glass. The library felt smaller that day, more intimate, shadows dancing under the flickering lamps. Emily stood at the window, watching the downpour. Her blouse clung slightly to her skin, damp from the walk between buildings. Adrian sat across the table, pretending to read, but his eyes betrayed him. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you ever feel trapped here?" She turned, startled. "You live in a palace." "It's a prison," he said flatly. Her gaze softened, but only for a heartbeat. Then the walls returned. Every place is a prison if you carry the wrong memories inside. The way she said it made his chest tighten. He stood, moving closer. "What memories do you carry?" She flinched, just slightly, but enough for him to notice. Her hand touched the scar on her wrist unconsciously, then fell away. "Some doors," she whispered, "are better left closed." Lightning flashed, illuminating her face in stark white. For a moment Adrian saw something raw there, pain, guilt, fear. He wanted to reach for her, but she turned back to the window, her reflection a blurred ghost in the rain-streaked glass. The storm outside raged on, but inside the library another storm quietly began to form. Adrian didn't know it yet, but Emily's walls weren't just for show. They were survival. Her past wasn't something that could be ignored or healed with gentle words. Her past was dangerous, and every day she spent inside the Caldwell estate, teaching the billionaire's son, she risked that past finding her again. Weeks turned into months. Their connection deepened, a silent thread weaving between every debate, every stolen glance, every moment when silence said more than words could. Adrian told himself it was just admiration, respect, maybe friendship. But the truth gnawed at him. undeniable and reckless. He was falling in love with her, and one evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of violet and gold, he realized there was no turning back. Emily was sitting at the table, reading aloud from a book. Her voice filled the room, calm and steady, yet carrying music in its rhythm. Adrian watched her lips move, the curve of her smile when she caught him drifting off, the way her eyes lit with quiet amusement. Something inside him broke. Without thinking, he whispered it, so soft it almost wasn't real. "I think I'm in love with you." Her voice stopped. The book lowered. For the first time since she had arrived, her composure shattered. "Adrian," she breathed, her tone a plea, a warning, 1,000 things unsaid. But he didn't take it back. He couldn't. And though she shook her head, though fear filled her eyes, she didn't move away. That was the moment the line blurred, the moment everything that followed became inevitable, because love had spoken. And love, once spoken, cannot be silenced. The days blurred into something dangerous. What had begun as lessons now felt like something else entirely. Their conversations stretched longer, their silences heavier. The air between them carried a charge, invisible yet undeniable, like the weight before a storm breaks. Adrian no longer cared about the empire his father was grooming him for. He cared about the quiet way Emily's laughter slipped out when he surprised her with a clever remark. He cared about the softness in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. But most of all, he cared about the mystery, because the more he knew her, the more he realized he didn't know at all. One evening, Adrian caught her in the hallway, leaving the study later than usual. The mansion was quiet, the staff gone to their quarters, shadows stretching long across the marble floors. "Emily," he called softly. She stopped. Turning halfway, her satchel clutched tight against her side. "Walk with me," he said. She hesitated, glancing toward the door that led to the guest house where she stayed, but something in his tone made her nod. They stepped outside, the night air cool and fragrant with the scent of wet earth. A fountain gurgled in the courtyard, moonlight glinting off its rippling water. Adrian shoved his hands into his pockets. "You've been here for months now, but I feel like I know almost nothing about you." Emily's shoulders stiffened. "You know enough, do I?" he pressed gently. "I don't even know where you grew up." She shook her head, her voice tight. "Some things aren't worth remembering." Her words struck him. He wanted to ask more, but the way her eyes shuttered, like iron doors slamming shut, kept him silent. "Instead," he said softly, "you're the only person in this place who makes me feel real." Her breath caught, almost imperceptibly. For a fleeting moment the walls around her cracked, but then she turned away, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't say things you can't take back." Adrian stepped closer. "I don't want to take it back." Her fingers tightened around the strap of her satchel. "Adrian, this can't happen." "Why not?" She didn't answer. She only turned, walking quickly across the courtyard. Her figure swallowed by the shadows, Adrian stood alone, the fountain's steady trickle echoing the rhythm of his heartbeat. The mansion became both paradise and prison. Every morning, Adrian waited for the sound of her footsteps, the way her heels clicked against the marble floor. Every evening he dreaded the moment she disappeared into her small guest house, taking her secrets with her. He caught fragments sometimes. A letter folded hastily back into her satchel, a slip of paper with a name he didn't recognize, a look of fear when she noticed the staff whispering about her. And once, late at night, he saw her on the phone in the courtyard, her voice sharp, urgent, almost panicked. "No. I told you, stop calling me here. I can't. No, not anymore." When she turned and noticed him watching from the window, she hung up instantly, disappearing into the darkness. Adrian's chest tightened. Who was she? One afternoon, their debate spiraled into something raw. Emily had asked him, "What's more dangerous, truth or lies?" "Lies," Adrian said instantly. She arched a brow. Are you sure? He leaned forward. Lies destroy trust. Lies rot everything. Her expression shifted just slightly. Almost pain. Almost guilt. And what if the truth, she asked softly, is worse than the lie? For a moment, the room fell silent. Adrian studied her face, the tension in her jaw, the flicker in her eyes. He felt the question wasn't academic at all. Then tell me anyway, he whispered. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she looked away, the debate crumbling under the weight of something unsaid. The turning point came on a warm evening in early summer. The estate's gardens glowed in golden light, roses blooming in rich crimson and ivory. Emily walked the path between them, her satchel left behind for once, her guard lowered in the fading day. Adrian followed, unable to resist. She turned when she heard him, startled at first, then weary. Adrian, he stepped closer, his voice steady. I can't keep pretending. Her arms folded across her chest, defensive. Pretending what? That this is just lessons. That I don't feel what I feel. Her eyes darkened. You don't understand. Then make me understand, he said fiercely. Because I can't stand being near you and acting like it means nothing. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Finally, she whispered, You'll regret this. I won't. Her resolve wavered, her breath quickening. If you knew who I really was. I don't care, Adrian said, his voice raw. I love you. Her eyes shone, not with joy, but with anguish. Don't say that. It's the truth, she trembled. Caught between walls she couldn't keep standing and feelings she couldn't keep buried. And then, almost against her will, she leaned into him. Their lips met under the rose-colored sky. It wasn't a kiss of triumph. It was a kiss of surrender, fragile, desperate, edged with fear. When they pulled apart, Emily's eyes brimmed with tears. This can't last, she whispered. Adrian brushed a hand against her cheek. Then let's make it last anyway. But deep inside, both of them knew. The clock had started ticking. From that night on, something shifted irreversibly. Their lessons became excuses to be near each other. Glances stretched into touches, touches into whispers, whispers into nights when the world outside the Caldwell estate ceased to exist. Adrian felt alive for the first time in years, not as a son, not as an heir, but as a man. Emily, though, she seemed torn apart. Her laughter was real but fleeting. Her smiles were fragile, always shadowed by something unspoken. At times he caught her staring at him with such tenderness it broke him, but then just as quickly her gaze would turn haunted, as if she was already mourning what hadn't yet ended. The secrets she carried pressed heavier with each passing day. Adrian began noticing locked drawers in her guest house, receipts crumpled and burned in the fireplace, a small box she kept hidden under her bed. He told himself it didn't matter. That love was enough, but love can't silence curiosity, and curiosity, when mixed with secrets, is a fire waiting for air. One night, Adrian heard footsteps echoing down the hall. He followed quietly, barefoot on the marble floor. Emily was there, slipping through a side door, her satchel slung across her shoulder. She moved quickly, as if afraid of being seen. Adrian trailed her into the garden, the moonlight spilling silver across the roses. She didn't notice him. She moved to the gate at the far end, pulling something from her bag, papers folded, sealed. She tucked them under a loose stone, glanced over her shoulder, then hurried back toward the house. Adrian pressed himself against the shadows, heart pounding. What was she hiding? Who was she meeting? The questions clawed at him, leaving him raw and restless. But more than the questions, more than the fear, was the ache in his chest, because no matter what she was hiding, no matter what she refused to tell him, He knew he couldn't stop loving her, and somewhere deep down, Emily knew that was exactly what would destroy them both. The Caldwell mansion had always been a place of whispers. Servants spoke in hushed tones. Guests lingered in corners, trading secrets like currency. But lately, the whispers grew louder, carrying the same name again and again. Emily, the billionaire's son, and his tutor were spending too much time together. Their walks in the gardens lasted too long. Their debates echoed late into the night. Eyes caught glances that lingered, touches that brushed too close, and nothing in that house escaped Richard Caldwell's notice. Richard sat in his study one morning, the kind of room that smelled of old cigars and polished mahogany. A fire roared in the hearth despite the spring warmth. Across from him, his assistant, a lean, sharp-eyed man named Victor, waited, his hands folded neatly. Richard's gaze didn't leave the window. "You've been watching them?" "Yes, sir." Victor's voice carried no emotion, and Victor hesitated just enough to earn a sharp glance from Richard. Then he said, "They're close." "Too close." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Richard leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "My son," he said slowly, "is a fool. But fools can be dangerous when they believe themselves in love." Victor nodded once. "Shall I dig into her background?" Richard's eyes flickered, cold and calculating. "Everything. Leave nothing untouched. I want to know what kind of woman dares to breathe the same air as my heir." Meanwhile, Adrian remained oblivious to the storm gathering. He was too wrapped up in Emily. Every stolen moment felt like defiance, like freedom. He didn't care about the estate, the empire, or the legacy. All of it felt hollow compared to the warmth of her hand brushing his under the table, the quiet laughter they shared when the rest of the house slept. But Emily cared. She cared too much. One evening, as they sat in the library, Adrian leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Do you realize how ridiculous this is? My father hired you to teach me, and instead you've ruined me. I can't think about anything except you." Emily froze, her smile faltering. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice heavy with warning. He leaned forward. "Don't give me that look." "You feel it too." Her hands closed around the edge of the table. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to tell him to stop, to end it before it could go further. But her silence betrayed her. He reached across, taking her hand. "I don't care what happens. I'll fight anyone. Even him." Her eyes snapped up, fear flashing. "Don't say that. Why not?" "Because you don't know what he's capable of." The words hung between them, sharp as glass. Adrian frowned. "What do you mean?" Emily pulled her hand away. "Nothing. Forget it." But he didn't forget. He couldn't. A week later, Adrian noticed his father watching him at dinner. Richard's eyes lingered longer than usual, his questions sharper, his silences heavier. "How are your lessons progressing?" Richard asked, his fork scraping against fine china. Adrian forced a casual tone. "Well enough. Is she competent?" Adrian bristled. "She's more than competent." A faint smile tugged at Richard's lips. "Ah, more than competent." The words were nothing on the surface, but beneath them Adrian heard it. Mockery, suspicion. He dropped his gaze to his plate, forcing himself to remain silent. But his chest burned. The walls of the mansion began to close in. Emily felt it first. She noticed the servants watching her more closely, conversations that ended when she walked into a room. Once, she found her guest house door slightly ajar when she knew she had locked it. Her things had been touched, though nothing was missing. She confronted Adrian in a quiet corner of the garden. "Your father knows." Adrian stiffened. "He suspects." "That's all. That's enough," she said sharply. "He'll destroy us if he finds out." He grabbed her hand, desperate. "Then let him." "I don't care." Her eyes softened, pained. "You don't understand. It's not just about us. It's about me. If he finds out who I really am—" She stopped, biting down hard on her lip. Adrian's grip tightened. "Then tell me,
Tell me who you are? Her chest rose and fell, her breath unsteady. I can't. Emily, please, Adrian, she whispered, her voice breaking.
Don't ask me that. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She pulled away, walking quickly toward the guest house, leaving him standing in the shadows, his heart split between love and doubt. Meanwhile, Victor's search uncovered fragments, a name that didn't match, records that seemed altered, places she had lived that she never mentioned, a photograph, grainy, of a girl who looked like Emily standing outside a courthouse years ago. Victor brought the file to Richard's desk. Richard flipped through it slowly, his expression hardening with each page. When he finally closed the folder, his jaw tightened. So she's not who she says she is, Victor inclined his head. What would you like me to do? Richard's voice was ice. Not yet. Let them think they're safe. The boy will come to me eventually.
And when he does,
we'll show him the truth. Emily felt the noose tightening. Her nights became sleepless. She checked her locks twice, sometimes 3 times. She avoided phone calls, destroyed letters, erased anything that could trace back to the life she had fled. But secrets have a way of seeping through cracks. One evening, Adrian found her in the library long after midnight, sitting in the dark, her arms wrapped around herself. Emily? His voice was soft, concerned. She looked up, startled, her face pale. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, he said, moving closer. What's wrong?
Nothing, she said quickly.
Too quickly. He sat beside her, refusing to let the silence swallow them. Emily, whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone. Her eyes brimmed with something unspoken, something heavy. For a heartbeat, he thought she would finally tell him. But then she shook her head, her voice trembling. If I tell you...
You'll hate me. I could never hate you. She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek.
Don't make promises you can't keep. The cracks widened. Adrian began to notice every whisper, every glance, every closed door. His father's words twisted in his mind, sharp and taunting. He wanted answers. He wanted the truth, but Emily's silence only deepened the mystery, feeding the fire of his suspicion and his need. And, somewhere in the shadows of the Caldwell estate, Richard waited for the moment when his son's love would collide with Emily's past. Waited for the inevitable breaking point. Because in the Caldwell house,
nothing stayed hidden forever, not money, not power, and certainly not secrets.
The first blow didn't come with shouting. It came with silence. Richard Caldwell had always been a man who controlled rooms with words, but when he chose not to speak, the weight of his silence was unbearable. Dinner that evening stretched into a gauntlet. The chandelier above glittered like a crown of ice, its light spilling across polished silver and white porcelain. Guests filled the long table, business partners, family friends, investors whose approval meant more to Richard than air itself. Adrian sat halfway down the table, his eyes drawn again and again to Emily. She stood at the far side of the room, assisting the staff, her posture straight, her eyes cast downward. She wasn't dressed like the guests, of course, she never was. A simple blouse, neat skirt, the uniform of someone employed, not invited. But still, Adrian couldn't look away, and Richard noticed. Every time Adrian's gaze lingered, Richard's fork paused. Every time Emily's hand brushed a wine glass near Adrian's reach, Richard's eyes flickered. The silence thickened until finally Richard set down his fork. The sound rang louder than it should have. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth, deliberate. She froze, then turned toward him. "Yes, sir?"
"Come here." Every head turned.
Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Emily stepped forward slowly, her hands folded in front of her. Richard studied her, his expression unreadable. "You've been with us for several months now." "My son speaks highly of you," Emily swallowed.
I hope I've met expectations. Richard's smile was faint, sharp. Indeed.
More than met them, it seems. Adrian's chest tightened. Father, but Richard raised a hand, silencing him without even looking. The table waited. Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Emily. Tell me, my dear, where was it you said you studied? Emily blinked, caught off guard. At St. Andrews, sir. Richard's brow lifted slightly. Is that so? Yes. He let the word hang in the air, his gaze cutting deeper.
Curious.
I happened to call a colleague there this afternoon.
He couldn't find record of a student by your name. The room stilled. Emily's breath caught.
Adrian shot to his feet.
Enough!
Richard's eyes flicked to his son, cold and calm. Sit down, Adrian! No. Adrian's fists clenched at his sides.
Why are you doing this?
Richard ignored him, his gaze never leaving Emily. Would you like to explain the discrepancy? Emily's lips parted, but no words came. Her pulse pounded in her throat. She felt every pair of eyes drilling into her, peeling back her skin. Finally, she whispered, I must have given the wrong year. The records may not be... Richard chuckled softly, cutting her off. Lies have a stench, my dear.
And yours is suffocating. The words sliced her open. Gasps circled the table. Forks scraped against plates.
Someone murmured under their breath. Adrian's voice broke the chaos. Stop it!
You're humiliating her. Richard turned his gaze on his son, sharp as a blade.
Better humiliated now than ruined later. Adrian's face flushed red. You don't know her. You don't know anything about her. Oh, Richard said softly, dangerously. But I do. Emily's knees threatened to buckle. Her fingers dug into her skirt, trying to hold herself upright. Adrian's chest heaved. If you know something, then say it to me. Not to her? Richard leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. She is not who she claims to be. She has lied about her name, her past, her very identity.
And you, my only son, are too blind to see it. The table buzzed with whispers, every eye darting between father, son, and the trembling tutor, caught between them. Emily shook her head, tears brimming. Adrian, please. But Adrian moved to her side, shielding her from the stares.
His arm wrapped round her shoulders.
I don't care what he says. I don't care what you've been through. I love you. Her body shook under his hand.
The room was spinning, collapsing in on her. Richard watched, a thin smile curling his lips.
Ah, there it is.
The word. He leaned back, satisfied. Love. The most dangerous lie of all. That night, Emily fled the dining room as soon as the guests dispersed, retreating to the sanctuary of her guest house. Adrian followed, pushing through the door without knocking. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. Emily, he said, his voice raw. She looked up, her eyes red, her face pale.
It's over, Adrian. He knows. I don't care what he knows. You should. Her voice cracked. Because he won't stop until he destroys me. Until he destroys us, then let him try, Adrian shot back. I'll fight him. I'll fight anyone. Her breath trembled.
She reached for his hand, holding it tightly. You don't understand. He's right. I'm not who you think I am. Adrian knelt in front of her, his hands gripping hers.
Then tell me, please, tell me the truth. Her lips parted, but the words wouldn't come.
Fear held them prisoner. Instead, she whispered, If you knew, you wouldn't look at me the same way. Adrian's voice broke.
I would. I swear I would. She shook her head, tears spilling. No, because my past isn't just mine. It's a chain.
And if you hold on to me, it will drag you down too. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Then let it.
I'd rather drown with you than breathe without you. Her resolve crumbled.
And she collapsed into his arms, sobbing into his chest. But even as he held her, Adrian knew the cracks were widening. The foundation of their love was shaking. His father had only revealed a sliver of truth, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt, one that would grow, no matter how fiercely Adrian tried to deny it. And Emily knew it too, because the past doesn't stay buried. It waits. It claws its way back, no matter how deep you dig, and hers was coming. In Richard's study, the fire burned low. He sat with a glass of scotch, Victor standing silently nearby. "She'll confess to him soon," Richard said, his voice steady. "She won't be able to bear the weight. When she does, he'll see her for what she is." Victor inclined his head.
And if he doesn't?
Richard's eyes gleamed like steel. "Then I'll show him myself." The storm had broken. The first blow had landed, and, in its wake, love trembled on the edge of ruin. The night air carried the smell of rain. Heavy clouds pressed low against the city, and somewhere beyond the estate walls, thunder rolled like a warning. Inside the guest house, Emily sat on the couch, her body curled into itself. A lamp flickered beside her, casting pale light across her face. Adrian paced the floor, his steps uneven, his heart drumming. Neither had spoken for several minutes. The silence stretched like a noose. Finally, Adrian stopped. His voice trembled but held firm. "Emily, no more half-truths. No more silence. If you love me, tell me everything. Tonight. Now." Emily looked up, her eyes hollow. "You don't know what you're asking?" "I do." He knelt before her, his hands resting lightly on her knees. "'Cause whatever it is, I can take it. I'd rather face your worst truth than live inside your silence." Her lips parted, but she hesitated.
Tears clung to her lashes, ready to fall. "Adrian, once I start, I can't stop."
"And once you hear it, you'll never be able to forget." He nodded slowly.
"Then let me carry it with you." For a long moment she only stared at him.
And then finally she let the words spill. "I wasn't always Emily Carter," she whispered. Adrian's brows knit. "What do you mean?" "My real name is Amelia Clark." The name landed like a stone in the room. Adrian searched her face as if testing the truth against her eyes. "Why change it?" he asked quietly. Her voice broke. "Because Amelia Clark is a name people whisper about. A name that opens doors, but only to drag me through courtrooms, headlines, and shame." Adrian's chest tightened. "What happened?" Amelia looked down at her trembling hands. Her voice was fragile, but each word carried the weight of years. "My father wasn't just a man. He was a monster dressed in silk. He built empires on lies, took what he wanted, crushed whoever stood in his way. When the government finally came for him, everything collapsed."
"Our name was on every paper. Our faces on every screen." Adrian's breath caught. "Your father, he was—" "Yes," she said, cutting him off, her voice sharp with pain.
"A fraud, a thief, a man who ruined thousands of lives. And when he went to prison, the world turned its fury on us.
On me, I was 18.
And I watched friends disappear, watched teachers whisper behind my back, watched strangers spit at my feet." Her hands trembled harder now, her voice climbing. "Do you know what it's like to walk into a grocery store and see your last name scrawled across the front page with the word criminal beside it?
To have people hate you for blood you didn't choose?"
Adrian's heart twisted. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back, shaking her head. "That's why I became Emily, because Amelia Clark couldn't breathe. She couldn't study, couldn't work, couldn't even order a coffee without someone sneering at her. Emily Carter was my escape."
My disguise. My way to build a life without the shadow of my father strangling me. The rain outside began to fall, pattering against the window. Adrian sat stunned.
He had known Emily was hiding something, but this was heavier than he could have imagined. He whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" Her laugh was bitter, broken. "'Cause you're Adrian Caldwell. Your family lives in headlines too."
"I thought if you knew the truth, you'd throw me away before I even had a chance to prove I wasn't him."
"That I wasn't my father." Adrian reached out again, gently this time, brushing her hand until she let him hold it.
"Emily, Amelia, whatever your name, I don't care."
"You're you."
"And that's who I love." She stared at him, her lips trembling.
"You say that now? But what about tomorrow? What about when the world finds out?"
"'Cause my past doesn't stay buried."
"People remember. They always remember." Adrian squeezed her hand, firm.
"Then let them. I'll stand beside you. Her body shook.
For the first time, the truth sat in the open air between them. And though fear still lingered, some small weight lifted from her chest. But outside, not everyone was blind to their conversation. Through the rain, a shadow lingered near the guest house window.
A figure, careful, patient, listening.
Victor, Richard's right hand, stood with an umbrella shielding him. His eyes narrowed. He had heard enough. When Emily's true name slipped past her lips, he stepped back into the dark, his jaw tight. Richard would want to hear this. The next morning, Adrian walked Emily along the garden path, the earth still wet from rain. Her face looked tired, pale, but her eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. "Thank you for telling me," Adrian said softly. She nodded, her voice fragile. "I don't know what happens now. We make our own future."
That's what happens, she gave a weak smile. You make it sound so easy. It doesn't have to be complicated. He stopped, taking her face in his hands.
"You're not alone anymore.
Understand?
Whatever storm comes, we face it together." Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to wrap herself in his certainty and let it shield her. But a shadow still lingered, whispering doubts, and before the day ended, those doubts would find fuel. Richard received Victor's report in his study that afternoon. "So," Richard said slowly, swirling the amber scotch in his glass, "our dear Emily Carter is none other than Amelia Clark." Victor inclined his head. "It seems so." Richard's lips curved into a sharp smile.
Ah, poetic.
"The daughter of a criminal entwined with my son," Victor's brow furrowed. "Do you intend to tell Adrian?" Richard's smile hardened. "Not yet."
No, the truth is a weapon.
"And weapons are only valuable when timed well." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes gleaming.
First, let's see how far they'll go.
Let's see how much he'll risk for her. That evening, as Adrian and Emily sat by the fire in the guest house, warmth wrapping around them, Emily rested her head on his shoulder. For a moment, the world was quiet, safe. But then the phone on the table buzzed.
Adrian reached for it, frowning. It was a message.
From an unknown number, 4 words glowed on the screen. "Do you really know her?" Attached was an image, a newspaper clipping. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Tycoon Clark, jailed for fraud. Family in disgrace." And there, in the corner of the grainy photograph, stood a younger Amelia, Emily, her face pale, her eyes downcast. Adrian's stomach sank. His fingers trembled. Emily saw the screen. Her breath hitched. Her body went rigid. The past had found them, and this time it wasn't whispering. It was screaming. The truth was no longer theirs alone. The cracks were spreading, and soon everything would shatter. The storm came at dusk. Wind howled through the trees, bending branches against the night sky. Rain lashed the Caldwell estate, drumming against windows, turning the manicured gardens into rivers of mud. Inside, the air was no calmer. The dining hall, usually a stage for polished elegance, had become a battleground. Richard had summoned Adrian and Emily with no pretense of choice. The long oak table stretched between them, polished and cold, as servants cleared the edges and then vanished like shadows, leaving the 3 of them alone. Emily sat rigid, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Adrian stood behind her chair, unwilling to sit, his jaw clenched. Richard leaned back at the far end of the table, his fingers steepled, eyes glinting in the firelight. "This," Richard said, his voice carrying above the storm outside.
Ends tonight. Adrian's fists tightened.
"You don't control me," Richard's lips curled faintly. "You think this is about control?"
No, this is about truth. Emily's throat closed.
She could feel it coming. The blade she had dreaded since the night Richard first looked at her with suspicion. Richard turned his gaze toward her, sharp and deliberate. "You've told him your name, Amelia Clark. You've told him about your father's crimes. Her breath trembled. Yes, but you haven't told him everything, have you? Emily's chest constricted.
Adrian stepped forward.
If you have something to say, Father, say it to me. Not to her. Richard's smile was thin. Very well. He rose slowly, his presence filling the room. Your beloved Amelia was not just the daughter of a fraud. She was complicit. The words cracked like thunder. Emily shot to her feet.
That's a lie.
Richard's gaze stayed locked on Adrian. When her father's empire crumbled, so did the evidence.
Millions disappeared, hidden accounts, falsified transfers.
Do you know whose signature was found on several of those documents? Adrian froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. No! Richard's voice was steady, merciless.
Hers? Emily's knees threatened to buckle.
Tears stung her eyes.
I was 18. I didn't know what I was signing. I thought it was college paperwork, trust funds, ordinary forms.
My father gave me papers and told me to sign, and Her voice broke.
I didn't know, but Richard pressed on, relentless.
The court spared her because of her age. They called her naive, a pawn. But not everyone agreed. There were victims, people who lost everything, who swore she was a conspirator, a willing accomplice. Adrian turned to Emily, his face pale.
Is it true?
Her breath hitched. Yes, but not like that, Adrian.
I didn't understand. I swear to you, I didn't understand what I was part of. The storm raged against the windows.
Inside, the silence was sharper than glass. Richard moved closer, his eyes burning. And now you expect my son, my heir, to tether his life, his name, his fortune, to a woman forever branded by scandal. Adrian's chest heaved. He looked at Emily, her face streaked with tears.
Her body shaking. He looked at his father, cold and composed.
Each word designed to pierce, and for the first time, he hesitated. Emily saw it. The hesitation. The flicker of doubt in his eyes, as brief as lightning, but enough to splinter her heart. No, she whispered, stepping back.
Don't look at me like that. Emily. Adrian reached for her. She shook her head violently, tears streaming. That's all it takes, isn't it? One seed of doubt.
One whisper from him, and suddenly you're wondering if I'm the monster they say I am. I'm not, Adrian said quickly, his voice desperate.
I'm not doubting you, but you are, she cried, her voice cracking. I saw it.
Just for a second, you looked at me like you didn't know me. Adrian's heart fractured.
Because I'm trying to understand. Because I want to protect you.
Her body trembled, every nerve fraying.
You can't protect me, Adrian.
You never could. The past is bigger than us.
It always was. Richard's voice slid into the space between them, low and triumphant. She's right. Adrian spun on him, fury boiling. You don't get to decide this.
Richard stepped forward, his face inches from his son's. Open your eyes, Adrian. She is a liability.
A scandal waiting to devour you.
If you defy me, if you bind yourself to her, you won't just lose me.
You'll lose everything.
Your inheritance, your future, your name.
All of it. Adrian's breath came hard, ragged.
Then take it.
I don't want your empire. I don't want your fortune. I want her. Emily's eyes widened, tears spilling. Adrian.
Richard's face hardened, steel beneath the firelight.
You think love will sustain you when the world spits in your face?
When doors close? When your own name becomes a curse?
Yes, Adrian's voice cracked.
Because I'd rather live poor and despised with her than rich and hollow without her. The words shook the room. For the first time, Richard faltered, just for a moment. But Emily couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She had never been chosen like this.
Never been fought for like this.
But instead of joy, dread twisted inside her. Because love, no matter how fierce, couldn't erase the headlines, the whispers, the signatures on those damning documents. She staggered back, her hands covering her face.
I can't do this, she sobbed. I can't drag you into my ruin. Emily, she turned, running from the dining hall.
Her sobs swallowed by the storm outside. Adrian started after her, but Richard caught his arm. Let her go, Richard said, his voice low. Adrian wrenched free, his eyes blazing. Never, and he ran. Outside, rain drenched Emily within seconds, her hair plastered to her skin, her clothes clinging. She stumbled across the gardens, lightning splitting the sky. Thunder chasing her steps, Adrian burst through the doors, calling her name, his voice tearing against the storm. She turned once, her face pale and broken, before disappearing into the shadows of the trees. Adrian followed, his heart pounding, his lungs burning, but the storm swallowed her, dragging her into the dark. Back inside, Richard stood alone in the silent hall. The storm raged beyond the windows, but he stood steady, his glass of scotch untouched. Victor entered quietly.
Watching him, do you think he'll come back?
Victor asked. Richard's gaze lingered on the rain. He will. When the storm passes, he'll see.
Love is fragile.
And the world will always crush it beneath its weight. But even as he said it, a flicker of doubt stirred deep in his chest, because for the first time in his life, Richard Caldwell had seen defiance in his son's eyes, a fire he couldn't smother. And he wondered, just for a moment, if love might burn hotter than even he imagined. The storm had broken. The truth was out. And now
nothing would ever be the same.
Morning came with no mercy. The estate, usually wrapped in its bubble of polished perfection, felt unsettled. Even the staff moved differently, quieter, their eyes darting between corridors, carrying whispers like smoke. In the guest house, Emily sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the phone in Adrian's hands. The newspaper clipping glowed on the screen, cruel in its clarity. Her younger self, captured at her father's sentencing, now stared back at them both. Adrian rubbed his forehead, his jaw tense.
Emily, who sent this?
She shook her head, her voice raw. I don't know, but it means people haven't forgotten. Someone out there still wants to be punished for his crimes. Adrian looked at her, his chest tightening. Then we'll block the number. Ignore it. Whoever they are, they don't matter. But she didn't answer.
Because she knew.
Deep down, she knew. Things like this never stopped at one message. And she was right. By mid-afternoon, the first headlines began to surface online. A gossip blog, small but vicious, posted a grainy picture of Emily leaving the Caldwell estate, her face partially hidden behind sunglasses. The caption burned beneath it. Billionaire heir's secret romance with disgraced tycoon's daughter? Adrian saw it when one of his friends texted him the link with nothing but 3 question marks. His blood ran cold. Within hours, bigger outlets picked it up. The story spread like fire in dry grass. Headlines twisted her past into spectacle, pairing her father's crimes with Adrian's fortune, painting her as an opportunist, a leech, a shadow who had wormed her way into the richest family she could find. Evening. The Caldwell estate's gates swarmed with flashing cameras. Reporters shouted Emily's name. They shouted Adrian's. They shouted criminal's daughter. The walls of safety crumbled. Inside, Emily stood frozen in the hallway as the sound of voices echoed through the windows.
Camera flashes stung from outside, even through glass.
Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold a glass of water. They know, she whispered, her voice breaking.
They know everything. Adrian took her by the shoulders, his eyes fierce.
Let them know. You've done nothing wrong. She shook her head violently.
It doesn't matter.
To them, I'll always be Clark's daughter. They won't see me, Adrian. They'll only see him. Adrian pulled her into his arms. Then I'll make them see you. I swear it. But as he held her, she could feel the storm rising, unstoppable. At dinner that night, Richard didn't wait long. The table was emptier than usual. Several guests had mysteriously cancelled their attendance. But the silence was heavier than the absent chairs. Richard set down his fork, his face unreadable. So, the vultures are circling, Adrian glared at him. Don't start. On the contrary, Richard replied smoothly, his gaze sliding toward Emily, who sat stiff and pale beside Adrian. This is precisely the moment to start. Emily's chest tightened, but she forced herself to meet his eyes.
I never meant for this to happen. Richard chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it.
My dear, Intentions matter little when the world has already judged you. Adrian slammed his hand on the table.
Enough!
Richard turned to his son, his voice low but sharp.
Can you not see it, Adrian?
The stain she carries will not fade. It will spread. To you, to this family, to everything I've built. Do you truly think investors will trust a Caldwell when headlines scream about your affair with a criminal's daughter?
She's not her father!
Adrian roared, his voice breaking. And I don't care what anyone thinks. The words echoed through the dining room, reverberating against marble and glass. For a moment, no one moved. The air trembled. And then, softly, Richard said, "You will." Emily's breath caught. She couldn't breathe under Richard's stare. His words weren't just disapproval, they were a promise, a warning. The next morning, the war began in earnest. Adrian awoke to messages flooding his phone. Some were supportive, most were not. Former classmates, business acquaintances, even family friends, all demanding answers. He turned on the television. A panel of talking heads debated Emily's past as if she were a stock to be traded. One smirked into the camera. It's a classic tale. The son of privilege falling for a girl with a scandalous past. But let's be honest. Does anyone really believe she's with him for love? Emily stood in the doorway watching. The words hit like knives. She turned and walked away before Adrian could stop her. By afternoon, Emily disappeared into the garden. She sat beneath the oak tree at the far end, where sunlight filtered weakly through the leaves. Her eyes were red, her face pale. When Adrian found her, she whispered without looking up, "I can't do this to you." His chest ached. He knelt beside her, taking her hand.
Don't say that, her voice trembled. Every headline, every whisper, they'll follow you forever. I thought I could escape my past, but I can't. And now I've dragged you into it. You haven't dragged me anywhere, Adrian said fiercely. I walked into this. I chose you. She shook her head, pulling her hand away. You don't understand. Love doesn't erase the world. It doesn't silence them.
And when the weight gets too heavy, you'll resent me. Just like everyone else, Adrian's voice cracked. I never will. But she didn't look convinced. That evening, Richard called Adrian into his study. The fire crackled low, shadows dancing across the shelves of leather-bound books. Richard poured himself a drink, his movements calm, deliberate. Sit, he said. Adrian remained standing. Say what you want to say. Richard's gaze was steady, sharp. You're blinded by her, and blindness is a luxury you cannot afford. Not as my son, not as my heir. Adrian's jaw clenched. I don't want your empire if it means abandoning her. Richard smiled thinly. You think this is about love? But love doesn't survive the world's judgment. It corrodes. It poisons. And when it dies, it takes everything with it. Adrian's hands shook at his sides. I'd rather lose everything than lose her. Richard's expression hardened. Then you were a fool. For a moment, the silence between them was absolute. And then Richard spoke again, softly, almost gently. Do you want to know the truth about her? The whole truth? Adrian froze, his heart hammered. What do you mean? Richard swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his eyes gleaming. Your tutor hasn't told you everything. Her past is darker than even she admits. And when you hear it, you'll understand why I cannot allow this to continue. The words landed like thunder. Adrian's chest tightened. Fear and fury warred inside him. Tell me, he demanded. Richard leaned back, smiling coldly. Not yet. You'll know when the time is right. And just like that, the trap was set. The world knew Emily's secret. But Richard still held one more card, and the moment he played it, everything would break. The storm left wreckage in its wake. By dawn, the Caldwell estate looked as though it had survived a war. Fallen branches littered the grounds, puddles reflected the grey sky, and the air smelled of wet earth and electricity. But the real devastation wasn't outside. It was inside Adrian's chest. He hadn't slept. He'd searched the woods, the roads, even the nearby town, calling Emily's name until his voice broke. But she was gone, vanished into the night as if the storm had carried her away. Now he sat in his study, drenched and hollow, staring at the fire that had long since died to embers. Victor entered quietly, carrying a tray with coffee. "You need to rest," he said softly. Adrian shook his head. "Not until I find her." Victor hesitated, then set the tray down. "The staff is talking. Some think she ran because she was guilty." Adrian's eyes snapped up, sharp as blades. "She isn't guilty." Victor lifted his hand slightly.
I believe you.
"But the others don't matter."
What matters is,
"What do you believe, truly?" Adrian's throat tightened. He replayed the night over and over, the accusations, the documents, the hesitation Richard had forced from him. He remembered Emily's face when she saw it. The way she broke, not because of Richard's words, but because of his silence. "I believe her," Adrian whispered. "But I let her think I didn't." Victor placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you need to prove otherwise, to her and to yourself." Meanwhile, Richard stood before his empire. The morning brought no peace to him either. Calls flooded his private line. Investors, board members, journalists, all hungry for rumors that had spread overnight. Somehow, whispers of Emily's past had leaked. Richard stood in his office, phone to his ear, listening as a trusted ally spoke fast. "They're saying your son is entangled with the daughter of a fraud, that she was complicit."
if this sticks, it could taint the entire family. Richard's jaw tightened. Handle it. Silence them. That won't be easy.
"The press is digging, and the more you deny, the more they'll chase." Richard hung up before the man finished. He walked to the window, looking down at the sprawling city below. Power had always bent to his will. He'd crushed rivals, silenced scandals, rewritten headlines. But this was different. Because this wasn't just about business. This was about his son, and for the first time in years, Richard felt his grip slipping. Emily, meanwhile, found refuge in a place she swore she'd never return to. An old boarding house on the outskirts of the city, run by a kindly widow who didn't ask questions. Emily paid cash for a small room with a peeling ceiling and a single window. It wasn't luxury, but it was anonymity. She sat on the bed, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. "You did the right thing," she whispered to herself. "He deserves better than you. He deserves freedom." But even as she said it, her chest ached, her body trembling, with the memory of Adrian's arms, his words, his defiance against his father. She wanted to believe it was enough, that love alone could conquer everything. But the past was heavy, and she had carried it so long that she no longer knew where it ended and where she began. Adrian refused to let go. By noon, he stormed into his father's office, his eyes bloodshot but blazing. "Where is she?" Richard looked up from his desk, calm, composed. If she left, it was her choice. "Don't lie to me," Adrian snapped. "You wanted her gone. You pushed her until she broke." Richard's voice was cool. "If she left, then perhaps she wasn't strong enough to face the truth." Adrian's hands slammed down on the desk. "This isn't about strength. This is about you, twisting her past to control me." Richard rose slowly, his height casting a shadow across the room. "You call it control.
I call it protection."
You are my son, my heir. I will not see you destroyed by a woman who drags scandal like chains behind her." Adrian's breath shook. "Then you don't know me at all. Because I would rather be destroyed with her than live untouched without her." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Richard spoke, his voice like steel. "If you walk this path, Adrian, you walk it alone. You'll have no fortune, no protection, no name. Do you understand?" Adrian didn't flinch. "Then strip it all away."
"I'll build my own name, with her." And he turned, walking out before Richard could answer. That night, the city hummed with rumors.
Socialites whispered in ballrooms, businessmen muttered in cigar lounges, and headlines hinted at scandal. Billionaire's son and the tutor with a past became a favorite story to chase. Adrian ignored it all. He searched tirelessly through boarding houses, libraries, coffee shops she once mentioned in passing. Every corner of the city seemed to mock him with her absence, until one evening, just as exhaustion threatened to break him, he heard her voice, soft, faint, carried on the air outside a small chapel at the edge of the district. He stopped, his heart thundering. Through the open door, he saw her, kneeling in the last pew, her hands clasped, her face streaked with silent tears. Adrian stepped inside, the creak of the wooden floor echoing. Emily's head shot up, her eyes wide. For a long moment, they only stared. Then she whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Adrian walked down the aisle, each step deliberate. "Where else would I be?" Her breath shook.
Don't do this.
"Don't fight him for me."
Don't lose everything because of me. He stopped before her, kneeling so they were level.
His hand reached for hers, trembling but sure. "I don't care about fortune."
I don't care about his empire. I care about you. I love you, Emily. And nothing your father did, nothing Richard says will change that. Her tears fell freely now. But you hesitated. You looked at me like I was guilty. His voice broke. Because I was scared. Not of you. Of losing you.
And when he twisted the truth, I froze. "But listen to me." His forehead rested against hers. "I don't doubt you."
Not anymore. Not ever again. Emily's sob shook her body.
She wanted to believe him. She wanted to fall into his arms and never let go. But in the corner of her mind, Richard's voice still echoed, "Love is fragile. The world will crush it." She pulled back slightly, whispering, "What if he's right?" Adrian's grip on her hands tightened. "Then let the world come. Let them try. We'll fight it together." The chapel was silent except for the sound of their breathing, the quiet weight of a vow, unspoken but undeniable. For the first time since the storm, Emily let herself lean into him, just for a moment, but outside the chapel, shadows lingered. A figure watched from across the street, phone in hand. With a single snap of the shutter, the moment was captured, the billionaire's son on his knees before the disgraced daughter, and by morning the image would be everywhere. The morning broke with fire. Not in the sky, the sun was hidden behind grey clouds, but on every screen, every newspaper, every whisper of conversation across the city. The photograph had spread like wildfire. Adrian Caldwell, heir to one of the most powerful fortunes in the country, kneeling in a chapel before a woman branded by scandal. Some called it a love story.
Others a disgrace.
But no one was silent. At the Caldwell estate, Richard stood at the center of the storm. His phone rang endlessly, his name splashed across headlines, investors demanding explanations. The photo wasn't just gossip, it was a weapon, one that threatened to tarnish everything he had built. Victor entered the study, his face grave.
It's everywhere.
The press won't let this go. Richard's jaw was tight, but his eyes betrayed something deeper, something that looked a lot like fear. Then they'll have to be reminded who holds power. But even as he said it, he knew. This wasn't a rival he could buy out. This wasn't a scandal he could bury. This was his son's heart, laid bare for the world to see. Adrian and Emily sat in the chapel, the echoes of the camera shutter still haunting them. Emily's face was pale, her hands trembling.
It's over, Adrian.
They'll use that photo to ruin you. Adrian cupped her face, steady and fierce. Let them. I'm not ashamed of you.
Not of us. Her tears brimmed, heavy with fear.
You don't understand. They'll drag my father's crimes back into the light. They'll twist my name until you regret ever knowing me. He leaned closer, his forehead against hers, his voice low but unshakable. Then we'll face it. Together. No more running. Emily closed her eyes, the warmth of his touch battling the chill of her dread. For so long she had carried her past like a chain. For so long she had believed no one could share the weight. And yet here he was, choosing it, choosing her. By afternoon, the Caldwell name was under siege. Reporters swarmed outside the gates, cameras flashing, questions shouted. "Mr. Caldwell, is it true your son is engaged to Amelia Clark? Did the Caldwell fortune finance her father's schemes? Will you disinherit him?" Richard ignored them, retreating into silence, his empire trembling beneath the weight of scandal. But Adrian wasn't hiding. Hand in hand with Emily, he stepped out of the chapel that evening into the chaos of microphones and cameras. Emily tried to shrink back, but Adrian squeezed her hand, his voice steady as he spoke. "Yes, I love her. And yes, I know her past.
I know what the world says about her.
But I also know the truth, that she was a victim, not a villain.
And I will not let anyone, not even my own family, tell me who I can love." The crowd erupted, questions flying, but Adrian didn't stop.
He led Emily through the chaos, his arm wrapped around her as if shielding her from the world itself. That night, the confrontation finally came. Richard waited in the grand hall, the fire blazing behind him, his figure dark and imposing. Adrian and Emily entered together, their fingers intertwined, their shoulders squared. Richard's eyes flicked to their hands, then to Emily. For once, there was no pretense in his voice, just raw anger and something dangerously close to desperation. "You've humiliated this family. You've dragged our name into filth. Do you realize what you've done?" Adrian's reply was calm but iron beneath the surface. "I've chosen love over fear. That's what I've done." Richard's gaze shifted to Emily. "And you, after everything your father stole, after the lives he ruined, you think you deserve this? You think you deserve him?" Emily's chest tightened, but she stood firm. It's trembling, but true.
"No, I don't deserve him. I never believed I did.
But he deserves the right to choose for himself.
And he chose me." The firelight flickered across Richard's face.
For the first time, he looked less like a titan of power, and more like a man cornered by something he couldn't buy, silence, or destroy. "Love," he spat, as though the word itself was weakness. "Love doesn't last. It breaks."
"It always breaks." Adrian stepped closer, his voice low but unwavering.
"Maybe yours did. Maybe you don't believe in it anymore, but I do. And I'd rather live one honest day in love than a lifetime in your shadow." The words struck deeper than Richard expected. For just a moment, his composure cracked, revealing the faintest glimpse of regret in his eyes, a memory perhaps of something he once had and lost. But he straightened, his mask returning. "Then you're no longer my son," Emily gasped softly, but Adrian didn't flinch. His hand tightened around hers. "If that's what it takes, so be it." The days that followed were chaos. Headlines exploded. Some painted Adrian as a fool, a rebel blinded by love. Others called him a romantic, a man brave enough to defy a dynasty. Richard moved quickly, cutting Adrian from the family fortune, stripping his name from the company. To the world, it looked like victory, a patriarch crushing his son's rebellion. But in quiet corners, whispers began, whispers of admiration,
Of respect.
of a young man building something of his own, not because of his father's power, but in spite of it. And beside him always was Emily. They lived simply at first in a small apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. Adrian took work where he could, leveraging his mind, not his name. Emily tutored again, her heart lighter now that her truth was no longer a secret. It wasn't easy. The world still judged, still whispered, still doubted. But in the quiet moments, over morning coffee, late-night laughter,
Hands brushing in the dark, they found something money could never buy. Freedom, love, each other. Years later,
Richard Caldwell sat alone in his vast estate. His empire still stood, his fortune intact, but the silence in the halls was louder than any storm. On his desk lay a newspaper, not of scandal, but of triumph. Adrian Caldwell, no longer his heir, but his own man, a startup he had built with his own hands, was thriving, known for integrity, for resilience, and beside him in every photo, smiling and unafraid, was Emily. Richard's hand lingered on the paper, his face unreadable. For the first time he wondered if perhaps he had been wrong. Perhaps love wasn't fragile. Perhaps it was the only thing strong enough to survive the weight of the world. But the thought came too late. Adrian and Emily sat together one evening, years after the storm that had nearly broken them. The sun set outside their modest home, the light spilling across the room in shades of gold. Emily rested her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving it all behind?" Adrian smiled softly, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Not for a second." She closed her eyes, peace washing over her. For the first time in her life, the past felt like just that, the past. And in the quiet, she realized something she had never dared to believe. Her past hadn't ruined everything. It had led her here, to him, to love that refused to break.